Good morning. We've talked the whole night through.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. Good morning. Good morning. It's great to stay up late. Good morning. Good morning to you. When the band began to play, the stars were shining bright. Now the milkman's on his way. It's too late to say goodnight. So good morning. Good morning. Sunbeams will soon smile through. Good morning to you and you and you.
This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. This hour, we're talking about one style of dance that's captured the hearts of Americans for decades. That's right. Did you guess it right? We're talking about tap today, and you may have seen it performed on stage or in movies, or maybe you've even worn a pair of tap shoes yourself. Later, we'll hear from a local dance coach who's leading teams of young tappers in competitions on the global stage. But first, we're diving into the history of tap and looking at how choreographers and dancers across the stage are keeping the tapping tradition alive today. Joining me now is Professor Kevin Ramsey, who's a chair of the theater division at the University of Hartford. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Catherine, for having me this morning.
And also with us is Associate Professor of Dance and Music Theater, also from the University of Hartford, Ralph Perkins. Ralph, good to have you here today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And of course, Katie Kavanaugh, who's the founder of the CT Tap Collaborative. Katie, thanks for being with us today.
Hi, thanks for having us.
So hopefully everyone has woken up from all the tapping. We would love to know if you're a lover of tap. So listeners, tell us why you love tap. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. So Katie, I want to start with you this morning. You know, something that each of our guests today have in common is a love for tap, which is why you're here. What was it about tap that really drew you in?
For me, I think it was just the rhythmic aspect of it. I never grew up taking ballet. It was only tap and jazz. So out of those two, it was definitely tap, number one choice for me. I think there was just something about being able to move the body and have the rhythmic resonance, like be able to be heard. You know, tap dance is one of the only dance forms that you can hear, that you can dance without actual music playing behind you because you are the musician. And I think that was something, because I am a musician, I've always been a musician, and at a young age playing instruments and being able to also dance a percussive art form, it just kind of tied it all together for me in a way that no other dance form could. And I think that's what really brought me so deep into it. Once I had broken my foot in college and I could not do any other forms of dance because I had to wear shoes. So another reason why I love tap so much is because you can dance tap no matter what kind of body you have. Like I've had to dance from a chair before and you can still do it. So I think it's just such an inclusive form of art, form of dance that anybody really can do. And I think that's something that really brought me into it more so than any other form.
Well, and I don't think I really made that connection until this moment where tap dancing, you're dancing and creating music at the same time. So is that really unique, I would say? Yeah,
again, like no other dance form really is structured the way that tap is. And being a musician, I teach it from a music theory standpoint. So, we talk about quarter notes, eighth notes, and the three and a break, and being able to teach, our students of how to create music through improvisation and using these building blocks, again, is something that you don't get in any other dance form.
Well, we definitely want to get into more of that later. But Ralph, I also want to ask, do you remember the first time you put on a pair of tap shoes, and what did that feel like?
Wow. It was funny. The first, I had already kind of learned some tap before I even put on tap shoes. So my mom taught dance before I was born, and then when I was a child, literally in the kitchen, she would teach me like time steps and things like that. She would just say, and I would just pick them up and do them. And then, when I was about 11 years old, 10, 11 years old, I put on my first pair of tap shoes, and it was, that was it. I'd already been kind of sitting over in the corner mimicking and doing what the girls were doing and all that stuff. And that was the kind of the only boy around kind of thing. And then the teacher walks over and says, "You want to take tap?" And I went, "Sure," like that. And she says, "Just buy your shoes." She gave me the lessons for free. And I remember my tap shoes cost $24. Now my tap shoes are almost $400.
Wow.
It's like a little difference in time.
That's a different kind of glow up, I feel like,
Right.
with your shoes. And I think a lot of us, when we think about dancing, especially, thinking about exposure, a lot of us have probably watched it on stage or watch a film version of the stage in movies. And you start, at least for me, I'm tapping, I'm dancing, but it didn't go further than just me enjoying it in my little private space with no audience and just myself. Kevin, what about you in terms of what was the moment? Do you remember the moment where you fell in love with tap and took it further?
Yeah, I grew up in New Orleans. I'm from New Orleans, and so music and culture and dance is such a part of the community. And I was a young kid, and we used to take Coke bottle caps and nail them to our shoes and just start doing something that was called buck dance. And it wasn't really tap dance. It's just kind of making this noise with your feet.
My dad did that.
Yeah, right. Just buck dance,
Yeah.
right? And then around the same time, there was a TV show called The Dick Cavett Show. And I'm watching this television show, and these 8 African-American male dancers come on stage who happen to be the copacetics. And we're talking the greats of Honey Coles, Charles Cookie Cook, Ernest Brown, Face Roberts, Ernest Bubba Gaines. And I was mesmerized. And I remember keenly saying to myself, I'm going to meet those guys one day. And this was before I even was interested in theater, right? It was just something about what these men were doing and the kind of class that they had and the dignity in which they were bringing to dance. But what they were doing with their feet was mesmerizing. And I'm like, I want to do that. And I didn't even know it had you could go study it. I didn't know there was training. Fast forward, I'm in junior high school, and a friend of mine's mother had a dance studio. And she said, we're looking for somebody to play the Tin Man in The Wiz. And in the Wiz version, he tap dances. So that's when I got my first pair of white shoes, tap shoes. And I brought them to New York City. And by the time I got to New York City, they were all beaten up and falling apart. But it was that love of seeing these men, the copacetics, that changed the trajectory of how I started thinking about dance.
Wait, do you want your tapped shoes to be beaten up, or do you want like brand new ones? I feel like there's an aesthetic to this.
Oh no, they need to be broken in.
Yeah, they definitely need to be broken in.
And some of them take a year or more to get broken. Oh yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Miller and Ben. Some of them are
Some of the
like
360s.
Yeah.
You want them to feel like they are woven into your foot, right? That they're like a glove.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and then clearly different kinds of shoes, different kind of moments. Katie, or tell us about the different styles of tap. What are they, and do you have any favorites?
Oh, I mean, how far back do you want me to go?
We've got some time.
My knowledge it starts around like the 20s era, the vaudeville type dancing. And a lot of times there were no taps on the shoes. It was just hard soled shoes. And in the cutting contest, the judges were underneath the stages, right? Because it was all about the music. So that style, again, like the buck style, was more prominent back in the early 20s, that vaudeville style. Legomania and flash tap came out of that more flashy type style where you saw the tricks, like the Nicholas brothers. They were all about that flash tap. And that's, I think, something that was different, that really kind of caught the eye, because the earlier forms of tap dance, like, you had to be an all-around performer. You had to go on stage and not only dance, but you had to sing, you had to do your comedy act, you had to write the whole thing. So it was a totally different type of performance versus, what we had in the swing era and what came out on film, because that was, again, very showy and people were watching. So all of a sudden there were arm movements, and this whole style of Broadway tap sort of came about, and it became less about the music and more about the show. So, the tap dancers of the time, they kind of all went underground, and the tap became like this underground thing. You didn't really see hoofers out on stage. And it wasn't until, I think, the 70s with No No Nanette and Honey Coles kind of bringing that style of tap back to Broadway and showing what tap dance really was about. Again, it was coming back to the music, Black and Blue, well, another show, a tap show, that really brought out what tap was about in the sense of rhythm. And, then we have Gregory Hines and everything that he did to revolutionize tap. And tap went from this very swing-based style of like Bojangles and the copacetics and turned into like this harder sort of rock and roll, syncopated, heavy foot, Chuck Green type style. And from there, it grew even more with Savion Glover, and bringing like the hip hop element and the street aspect of tap, which again kind of brings it back full circle to when they were putting tacks and Coke bottles caps on the bottom of their shoes and having the cutting contest on the corners. And, you had to kind of work your way up to be on the good corners with the good dancers. So, that whole element of tap is very different than what we saw in film until the movie Tap came out. And you saw an actual, it wasn't choreographed. That whole scene, the tap challenge scene, that was all improv with the masters. And so to have something like that on film, I think also kind of gave people this idea of, tap dance is a little bit different than what we really think it is. So we've seen it change from, again, this no metal on the bottom of the shoes, very rhythmic style of dancing into something that's very growing with the music of the time, which swing, and becoming a little bit more that showy, that flashy, so that, it shows up well on film. And then again, changing to be, well, let's add the rhythmic aspect of it back in, then let's bring the street version of it in, so it's a little bit more funky, and we can have different types of movements. Tap hop is becoming a thing where that mix of tap dance and hip hop, because they're kind of like cousins,
right,
in a sense. So we've also seen tap move into like a contemporary form. So you have contemporary tap where, you're taking a slow contemporary type song and you're not necessarily doing this 3 and a break type rhythm or these fast steps that you would always see. It's more of like this bebop type style of, it just kind of goes, and it might not have a rhyme or reason to it, but it fits with the music in that expressive way. So tap has just grown and flourished in so many different avenues, because I think it's something that's adaptable in a way that, again, most other dances aren't, because we have the sound. So we can express in so many different ways based on how we're hitting the stage, what type of music we're using, if we are using music, and the structure of our performance piece. Improv has become, again, it's such a big part of dance that studios most likely don't teach unless you have, like an actual tap dancer who's studied like why improv is so important. So you have all of these different aspects, and just to watch how it's changed, how the style has changed, and be able to kind of go back and forth between all those styles, I think is something that keeps that tradition alive and keeps that history alive. Because without one, we wouldn't have the other. Without the Buck style, we wouldn't have what Gregory did.
Right.
So, having that rich history in all of those different styles and being able to save the choreography from as many different styles as we can, I think is, again, something that gives tap such its richness. It's the richness of the tradition. It's the richness of the history. It's the richness of the whole entire experience.
Well, I think it's amazing how they're all so interconnected. Like you said, you can't have one without the other. And there's so much history behind this. And like many things, something that you thought you knew, maybe you're familiar with, actually has so much more in the background. And then you mentioned Gregory Hines earlier. So a while back, Maurice Hines appeared on a Connecticut public television show called The Kate. Maurice and his brother, Gregory Hines, were both tap legends. And sadly, Maurice passed away last year. But when he performed on The Kate, He danced alongside the Manzari brothers. So let's take a listen to a bit of that performance here. So Ralph, as you were listening to that, what did you think about those rhythms and sounds? I feel like they're so crisp.
Oh yeah. That's everything in tap is the crispness and the crispness. Excuse me, my lips are not moving great this morning. And the clarity and I teach a lot of students in a lot of different levels, and I talk to them about the space off the floor is just as important as the tap hitting the floor, because if you don't have the silence, you don't have the clarity of the sound when it happens. There are many different styles of tapping of how the tap works to the floor, and you got to kind of work all those styles in a mixture together of what they need to do. There's weight displacements. There's times when you have to leave the floor or basically pull out of the floor, but your tap doesn't leave the floor, so your tap can move along the floor. And so that's what creates all the different nuances that you hear in the rhythmic patterns.
Well, it's amazing. It sounds like some physics.
Oh yeah, all dance is physics. I mean, it literally is. It's physics of the human body. That's kinesiology.
Right.
And I'm very big. Well, I teach more of a Broadway show tap style with rhythm mixed in. Like you have to have them all. But I teach soft shoe, clogging. It just went out of my
you know
brain.
What? It's a very human thing to happen.
It'll slap me later.
Yeah, it will.
Foxtrot. I'm sorry. And things of that nature that where you're dancing with rhythmic sounds. So because I do a lot of Broadway musicals and shows and things of that nature, and so I or Broadway style, and so with that you have to have, formation changes. You have people have to move. You have to do things. You have to have a tap duet. You have to have this couple's going to do a soft shoe in this number, things like that. Or if you're doing like I did Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, I added a whole clogging section into the challenge dance and things like that. So you have to pick up the different styles, and what the dance style and the rhythm style have to kind of merge and work with each other.
You mean it doesn't just magically come together?
Oh, no. So, a lot of people think that.
Right. Well, that's what I love knowing that, because it's just such a blend of art and sciences that I think we're kind of just starting to grasp. And Kevin, with everything that you just heard, can you talk about what separates a good tapper from a great tapper?
My mind is spinning because I'm thinking about the history again of this art form. I think there are a lot of variables that separate good tap dancers from a great tap dancer. Articulation. What are you saying when you dance? It's not just about a bunch of steps. It's really an oral communication. And back to the history piece, like there are many cultures who have influenced this very unique American dance form. African, Irish, when we think even about flamenco. So tap dance is not unique in itself as it relates to rhythmic and what we do as using your feet to be a drummer. And so when we think about, the dynamics, vaudeville was mentioned, but even prior to that, there was minstrel shows that influenced dance in a very real way. And there was this collision that happened between African Americans and the Irish culture down in the Bowery in the 1800s, something called 5 Points. And I'd done a show called Juba, and it was about the competition between this Irish jig and reel dancer and this African boot dancer, right? Even when we think about South African boot dance, that's all about rhythm. But this unique American dance form, I can't even imagine that they imagined what this form would become, right? Because tap dance has actually influenced music in a very deep way. John Bubbles of Buck and Bubbles, was back in the 30s, was said to influence bebop. And we have Dizzy Gillespie saying he was listening to this tap dancer. And this was the first time where the heel drop was put in to really syncopate the sound in a way that had never been syncopated before, which then allowed jazz musicians to go, oh, I can create that riff in my instrument. So this lineage, again, when I was called to do this, I got full because I think about, again, at 8 years old, I see these men on TV. Fast forward, I get to be in the studio with them in the 1980s, in a studio called Phasels, which is a place where tap dancers and flamenco dancers would gather. So what makes great tap dancers is those who get into a room and continue to practice their craft, right? Because after you get all the flaps and the shuffles, a step is a step is a step is a step is a step. What do you do with that step, right? And how do you begin to communicate? I remember many mentors would talk about it's like the heartbeat, right? That's where it starts, right? That's that kind of connection to yourself, connection to nature. And so I'm just happy that we continue to celebrate tap dance in all of its influences.
Well, and I was going to ask you if you had a moment where you felt like the performance is from the heart, but I feel like maybe your own heart when you're performing.
Yeah, again, I watch Ralph's work, who is a brilliant teacher, brilliant choreographer. And I think he's always stressing to students, it's more than the step. And I remember some of my mentors would talk about, how do you get your work to resonate beyond the footlights? How do you hit the back wall of a 2,000-seat theater? And what is the story you're telling inside of these steps, right? And I think, as been said, tap dance is unique because it's not just the body, it's also what's happening with your feet in connection to the earth and the ground.
I just want to dovetail off that. I have people that come and see shows and where we have big tap numbers and a lot of people tapping things. And it was like, and people get so excited, and that connection is hearing rhythmic patterns does connect to your heartbeat, and so that's what it. And if you're sitting in an audience during a tap show, and especially a live one,
right.
then it's the energy from the rhythmic patterns, I think, connects to us deeper than we think,
right.
because you literally, audiences get excited during tap shows when it's a really great number that's happening, and it's and all cogs are working,
right. When I think that you can't help but start tapping, right? Even if you're not a dancer. I mean, we're not listening to anything right now, but just hearing your stories and your experiences, I'm here like I can't stop moving, which is not a great thing here, but hey, this is what we're going to do today. And so for our listeners, you're listening to dancers, choreographers, and instructors, Kevin Ramsey, Ralph Perkins, and Katie Kavanaugh, who are talking about the art of tap dance, and we will be continuing this conversation. Coming up, we explore the evolution of tap in the U.S. through some of the greatest tap legends. Let us know if you're a Gene Kelly or Bill Bojangles Robinson or a Gregory Hines fan. We will love to hear from you. Leave us a comment on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live.
But every night the set that's smart is intruding and nudist parties in studios. Anything
This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. This hour, we're putting on our tap shoes and shuffling our way through the history of tap dance in the U.S. With me now is Ralph Perkins, who's an associate professor of dance and music theater at the University of Hartford, Kevin Ramsey, who's a chair of the theater division at the University of Hartford, and Katie Kavanaugh, who is the founder of CT Tap Collaborative. So I want to jump straight to this. Kevin, earlier, Bill Bojangles Robinson was mentioned. He is one of the most notable tappers throughout time, rose to popularity during the first half of the 20th century. Can you tell us who was Bill Robinson and what mark did he leave on the tap legacy?
Oh, he was a great influence. I mean, the general public may know him from all of the Shirley Temple movies, right? But besides that, he was an innovator, probably had some of the cleanest feet that a tap dancer could have. And he had this really infamous stair dance routine, which if you ever tried it, it's probably nearly impossible to perfect it. But I've seen many dancers do a great job at this stair dance routine. And he had an influence, and he coined this phrase, everything's copacetic, meaning everything's cool, right? Everything's good, which really led to this group of men, the Copacetics. This group was formed in 1949 that then led to influencing so many other dancers. And that's what's interesting to me about tap dance, how it's such a communal, even all of dance is communal, but there's something about, there's a community and a kinship and a fellowship of exchanging and passing on not just steps, but life, right? I've learned so much from my mentors that had nothing to do with dance, that had everything to do, how are we interpreting this dance? They would show you a step, I'm going to show you 8 bars. When you come back, don't do it like me, but make sure you do the steps, but don't interpret it like I'm interpreting it, right? So there's great freedom in how tap dancers are allowed to communicate, which leads to improv, which is a whole nother state of being.
Right.
When you can take these steps and then in the moment begin to create musicality and music just from, again, a flap will always be a flap, a shuffle will always be a shuffle. But how are we interpreting these steps? So he was great influence.
I'm just having images of myself falling off the stairs. So if I ever made an attempt. Well, and Kevin, earlier you mentioned minstrel shows because that's where Bill Robinson's career began. Can you explain what are minstrel shows and how he had to navigate some of the racist structures during his career?
Well, I know Bill Robinson was involved in the vaudeville period. I'm not familiar with the history of him being involved in minstrel shows because minstrel shows is the blackening of the face that mostly white performers did. As a mocking of black life. And so, minstrels has a really interesting history in this country of what it was. Minstrels came and then that led to the vaudeville shows. So I was not aware that Bill Robinson was part of the minstreling cycle because he doesn't seem to be a man who would put on blackface.
Sure.
And so I know Burt Williams and George Walker were part of the minstrel cycle. But I know during that period, again, you had these performers who were multi-talented, as Katie was saying. They weren't just tap dancers. They sang, they danced, they did acrobatics. They were just all-around entertainers, right? And so I'm always wanting to make sure that as we talk about the history of them, that we're celebrating the men and women who were the trailblazers, whose shoulders we stand on in a very real way. I know I do, and so I'm always looking to celebrate them.
Well, and Bill Robinson made a big impression on many up-and-coming tap artists, including someone who some of our listeners who may know from this clip. So, Ralph, we were just listening to Gene Kelly performing the 1952 classic Singing in the Rain, which I know a lot of people are familiar with. Let's talk a little bit about Kelly's legacy. What did he add to tap history?
He added his way of moving was, I think, his strongest suit. He was an excellent tapper, but he was an incredible dancer, period. He had an athleticism to what he did that was untouched by many dancers for many years. I mean, the man could leap and jump and land and drop to the floor and get up. I mean, he was like a ballet dancer who could tap and he could do jazz. He could do everything, and he was like an all-around dancer in that sense. And and he brought, like I said, he brought an athleticism to the dance form with over the tops and a lot of the aerial stunts and things like that he, and I don't think he necessarily created them. Some he did,
Sure.
but he took them and stylized them, and that's what we know so well because of what I call the Golden Age movies, and. Which, I mean, but not only him, but there were so many other stars in that era. We were just talking about Eleanor Powell, of course, Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly as well, Ann Miller, Donald O'Connor,
yeah.
Debbie Reynolds. I mean, all of them. They brought their own little piece of the to what they did and how their styles worked. But they were kind of like the full entertainer, the full packages of they did everything. But Gene, to me, I don't think he necessarily advanced rhythm so much as more style. But he was amazing.
Well, yeah.
You can't
Right.
deny that too.
Well, Eleanor Powell has been mentioned a couple times, and in the 1930s and 40s, she really launched her career through tap. Right? Can you tell us more about her?
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily know her history herself, but she was an amazing tapper. I mean, she was one of those people that, I mean, her feet moved like lightning, and what amazed me about her, and as well as Fred Astaire and Donald O'Connor. And Miller, even you would watch them dance, and there would be sounds coming out of their feet, and you're thinking, how are they doing that?
Right.
I mean, that's what when I was growing up. When I grew up, there was no internet. We had 3 TV stations. There's the antenna on top of the chimney,
Yes.
that spun around and tried to
Absolutely.
But I would watch a movie musical and then and listen to what they were doing and watching, and I'd run out into the yard during the commercial breaks and do it in the yard, or you try to figure out what they were doing with their feet and all this stuff like that, because you just literally. We didn't have the means of education that we have now. We have the internet that has everything on it. I mean, which is it's a terrific for that.
Well, and clearly we can talk about great tappers throughout time forever. But Katie, I wanna home in on one more before we go to break. Earlier, you mentioned Savion Glover, who was a student of Gregory Hines, who we mentioned earlier as well. And Glover had a very unique style. I think you touched a little bit about earlier. We'd love for you to get deeper on that. But before we do, let's listen to a quick clip of his tapping. Okay, everyone is smiling the moment that clip started playing. So, Katie, we'd love for you to tell us about this style of tap that we just heard.
Yeah, so Savion, he brought speed. And he brought that speed with a type of syncopated, like, downbeat that we hadn't heard before. And being a student of Gregory's, Gregory grew up with a master's. So he, had the old style as well as everything that he created. And he was able to pass that down to Savion and let Savion, again, because tap is so open as a form of dance. There's so much interpretation. Again, a shuffle is a shuffle, but how do you do that shuffle? There's 30 different ways to do that same shuffle. So what Savion did, he took everything that he had learned. There was nothing new there, but he just kind of tweaked it in a rhythmic sense that we hadn't heard before. And I think that's something that a lot of us still kind of get tripped up on when we're teaching, because students know a step, and then as soon as you change that rhythm, it's the same exact step, different rhythm, all of a sudden they can't do it. And that's kind of like what Savion brought, because he was able to really mix the tap and what was happening in music and what was happening in life in the 90s with the whole hip hop explosion.
Right.
And noise funk was like the history of tap dance, like literally from the beginning to the end. And what he was able to do with that was just to bring this different element and mix it with everything that was modern. And Gregory was doing that in a way with a rock and roll, but Savion took it that one step farther. And there's even a clip I remember from Sesame Street where he kind of like did this little rap and he tapped to it.
Right.
So there was this element of being able to mix this style in a totally different way. And because he's Savion, he could, just the way that his feet moved, I don't think anyone has come even close. Maybe Cartier Williams, who was Savion's protege, but nobody really has been able to recreate that style. When you hear a clip of Savion, like, you know it's him because there's no one else that sounds like that. And just the way that he was able to put in these like little rhythmic punches into something that was, you know, kind of, I don't want to say like a mundane paddle and roll 16th note, but that's basically what it was. And just those accents and the way that he danced, it wasn't showy. He was always kind of bent over. He's this big, tall dude. And he just kind of like hovers over himself because he's so into what he's doing. And that just, it, for whatever reason, like if you were watching most people and they're all, you know, kind of hovered over like that, you wouldn't want to watch them. But with Savion, there's something about you, he just draws you in. And like, you feel like he's creating this little bubble around himself in this rhythm, and it's all about his feet. And so you're just immediately drawn to his feet, and no matter what he does, you connect with it on such a different way. And I think that, you know, we were talking about the heartbeat earlier and how just anything with tap sort of just connects you. And I think it brings you to a place where you are just in that primordial sort of rhythm, that ancestral place where we don't get brought very often through dance, except for these rhythmic type of dances. And so I think it was kind of like Savion kind of connecting us to that new line of ancestors. And, you know, everything that he had learned and he had taken, like, you rarely see Savion swing. But when you do, you know it's a nod to the masters. And you can tell through some of his steps who he stole them from. Just like Gregory, you could tell who he stole his steps from. And it's no secret. Like, we steal steps. There's nothing new. And we take those steps and we make them our own. So Savion having this incredible range of teachers, of also growing up with the masters, he took all of their steps and turned them into something that was so new, was so different, was so innovative, that I think that was what was able to lead tap to what it is now. You know, with Jason Samuel Smith and what he did, he had that heavier, hard-hitting, fast style as well. You look at Chloe and Maud, they're kind of along that same line. Io, she studied with him. She's got that same sort of style, and you watch her dance, and you're like, yeah, he's definitely Savion's student. So yeah, he brings this clarity, as we were talking about before, to the speed.
Well, and so we've gone from the 20s up until present and talk about nodding to the masters and continuing on the history with the present. I want to end with Kevin here to talk about really quickly about Minute here. Why is it important for tappers today to acknowledge that there's all this history behind us while trailblazing ahead?
It's interesting that, you know, again, we all come from some place, and we've all been impacted by something that happened before us. And I think there sometimes can be a disconnect that what may be experienced today is new. And I think if you've been around long enough, you can identify where things are coming from in a very real way, right? And so when I think about the Nicholas brothers, when I think about Sammy Davis, when I think about Peg Leg Bates, when I think about John Bubbles, when I think about Chuck Green, when I think about Clora LaReed, when I think about Brenda Buffalino, when I think about Diane Walker, when I think about Ayodele Cassell, the young tap dancers, I think that we are part of a rich tradition and a family. Katie was just mentioning Savion. When I worked with him in Black and Blue, Savion had the unique ability to see a step and he was a savant in a way, that he could see it and then do it immediately. He didn't have to have you break it down. And that was scary, to watch a young 15-year-old kid be able to dissect things, but he had been influenced by so many people. The Jimmy Slide, I can't forget Jimmy Slide. There have been so many influencers in this world, right? And I think it's a very unique American art form that builds community in a very real way. It has its own voice, and where it's going. There's a young dancer by the name of Jared Grimes, who's in the recent production of Funny Girls on Broadway. The stuff this young man is doing with his feet is pretty much off. Again, Savion, there's been generational talents, right? Every generation is ushering in new ideas based on old forms. And that is the job of a new generation, is to move it forward. And so I'm excited to see the hands that tap dance is living in right now. We have Katie here, who's doing her work here in Connecticut. Ralph is mentoring and continuing to teach dancers. And I miss the art form, right, as a practitioner. And I'm not as involved because of an injury I sustained, but my shoes still sit in my office. I had them on a couple of months ago. And the love of dance is, I also think tap dance is therapeutic. There's something very therapeutic about getting in a room by yourself, with yourself, and being able to make music. So I hope your listeners can use YouTube to go, if you don't know some of these folks, go look them up. Right? Go check them out.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you all for sharing your experiences and tapping with us. My feet are twitching right now. So I have all of you to thank for that. You've been listening to Professor Kevin Ramsey, who's the chair of the theater division at the University of Hartford. Kevin, it was so great talking with you today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're also listening to Ralph Perkins, who's an associate professor of dance and music theater at the University of Hartford. Ralph, thank you for bringing your tap shoes here today.
Thank you.
And also Katie Kavanaugh, who's the founder of the CT Tap Collaborative. Katie, thank you for sharing your love for tap dancing with us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And coming up, we are going to be hearing from Jillian McNamara, who is a local tapper, teacher, and gold medalist. She just returned from Prague, where her students represented Team USA at the World Tap Championships. You can join the conversation. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. This hour, we've been talking about tap dance, its history, and its enduring legacy. Now I'm joined by Jillian McNamara, who is a gold medal winning coach of Team USA in the World Tap Dance Championships. Jillian and her team just recently returned from the competition in Prague. Jillian is also the founder of the American Dance Collaborative. Jillian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So you've been listening to the conversation. Anything jump out to you that you would like to share with us?
I mean, everything that they were saying was just so spot on and so insightful. And I really appreciate them sharing that, tap is still alive and the evolution is continuing and ongoing. The things that these dancers are doing is truly incredible and truly amazing. And I couldn't agree more with everything that they were saying.
Well, and like you just said, I think it's incredible that we have such a huge tapping community here in Connecticut and obviously around the world. And Jillian, you're a coach, but you yourself once competed in the World Tap Dance Championships yourself, right? How old were you when you first started doing that?
I was 11 when I first went to the World Tap Championships. So that was back in 2011. And then I had competed there for 7 more years and earned 4 gold medals myself in the solo category, as well as 2 gold medals in the group dance category, and several other silver medals and bronze medals. And just going to this competition in general ties into everything that they were saying about the tap dance community, but on a much larger scale of the whole world. Like, we have the community in Connecticut and then, of course, in the United States, but now as well, just to see the community in a global aspect is like unreal. It is absolutely the best part of going there, the best part of traveling overseas. Just the love of tap dance in the competition, seeing the different styles, the different genre. But as I think it was Katie was saying before, how there's like tap hop and the more jazz style and the more swing style, and each country has their own preference on which ones they prefer to do. The contemporary tap. It's really incredible to see, and that's been my favorite part over all these years about going to these championships.
Well, I think it's incredible how they all kind of meld and watching different cultures come together and tap. I'm imagining it's a very beautiful thing to witness. And you were there with your team and just got back from the championships in Prague. Who did you bring over there to compete, and how did it go?
Oh, we had 72 dancers from all over like the tri-state area, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, and then we even had a dancer from Indiana come in, and it went incredible. We brought home 3 gold medals, 2 silver medals, and 2 bronze medals as well.
Well, it's quite the tapping achievement, I think, and we've got about we have a couple minutes here, but I do want to talk about this hour. We've been discussing decades of tap dance history and how it's changed significantly over time. How do your young students approach tap these days?
I mean, it kind of just is, it's a little bit different from the younger kids to the older kids. Of course, the children were doing a little bit more of the upbeat style, the upbeat jazz, swing style even. And then when we get to the older kids, there's often a preference of the contemporary tap to the more like lyrical aspect of it, where they can really show their emotion and tell their story through their dancing. And it's really just preference of the student, of the choreographer as well. And we kind of like to dabble in it all, all of sometimes the more tap hop of it. But we kind of do it all.
Yeah. As you do. I think that's the way to go. And for you personally, we've been talking a lot about history behind the art form and everything that from the past to today. But we also talk a lot about joy. What is it about tap that specifically brings you so much joy?
I mean, it's the rhythms, the fact that you can create music while also dancing. That's something that you don't get in any other style of dance. So you're musically creating these rhythms to go with the music that you're tapping to, or no music at all, and still using your body and telling your story and performing all in one. I think that's truly the part that I love the most.
Well, I kind of like that you went there because that's how we started the show, and that's kind of where we're ending it. A little full circle moment here. We've got about 30 seconds here, but I want to ask, what do you hope our listeners get away from this conversation today?
That tap dance is very much still alive and thriving, and that, there's so many incredible dancers out there. Like, I think it was Kevin was saying before that, go look it up on YouTube. Go watch these dancers, Savion Glover, Michelle Dorrance, Ayodele, even the Gregory Hines videos, Bill Bojangles. Go watch it. Like, we're still up and running. And it's get involved, get a pair of tap shoes, or just watch if you want to go see a show. That's definitely what I think the biggest takeaway is.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. You've been listening to Jillian McNamara, who's a gold medal winning coach of Team USA, a group of young dancers who recently competed in the World Tap Dance Championships. Jillian, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm Catherine Shen. Today's show is produced by Chloe Wynn. Our technical producer is Dylan Reyes. Download Where We Live anytime on your favorite podcast app. And thank you so much for listening, and happy tapping, everyone.